Okay, so moving right along. So this slide, we're going to see it again. So I'm just going to go very quickly, but it's something I want people to really take home with them. I think it's really critical. If you get this slide, it's the key to unlocking the whole conundrum that we're in. So modern Western, I should say contemporary Western culture, right? Modern is like a long period, contemporary is just right now, and this is all very new, separates three things that are inherently bound up to each other and should be by nature and by religious law, we would say as Muslims, right? Allah created us as human beings. He created nature, he endowed it with a purpose. He also, legislates morality. And so these are coherent and in tune with each other. And by both the nature of reality and by religious law and norms, sex, reproduction, marriage, and morality should be bound together. Now, I want to say that also as Muslims, we do not, Islam is the middle position. And I think from a Muslim perspective, traditional Christianity is comes across as a very, what they call sex negative religion. You have Augustine in the 4th century, right, who was a licentious man before he became a Christian. But once he became a Christian, he was so disgusted with his previous life of profligacy that he took a very, very negative view towards the body, towards sexuality. Also, there's a very heavy Platonic and Neoplatonic influence, which also very much downplayed kind of the materiality in favor of pure spirituality. And so Christianity...
I think you're right. Augustine was much more influenced by Neoplatonism, the Hellenistic Greek philosophy, than by the Hebrew Bible, which doesn't have any of these inhibitions. The Hebrew scriptures, the Jewish Bible, in other words, doesn't have any of these sex negative. I mean, the Song of Songs, for example, in the Old Testament is very erotic, actually, almost obscene for some people. But for him, he was much more influenced by Greek philosophy, which with its denial of the body, seeing the body as a prison, and so to be really close and transcendent, you had to deny the carnal nature, the sinful nature, which inevitably meant sexuality. So yeah, absolutely right. And Augustine's influence over the Western Church has been phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
Right. And it's very important because, again, I think so Islam, sort of understands itself and has been understood as Muslims as being a middle path. And, this sort of, traditional Christian view, I mean, Augustine said sex was basically a necessary evil. Yes. So it's intrinsically evil because it's of the flesh, and the flesh is fallen, right? And carnal, desires where the trouble began with back in the garden with Adam and Eve. And, anyway, all of the influences that you also just mentioned, it's evil in and of itself, but it's necessary for the propagation of the species. And according to Augustine too, even a married couple should not enjoy it. They should try to enjoy it as little as possible. It's like, just do what you have to do to make sure the species goes on, but you should try to enjoy it as little as you can. So there's nothing in Islam like this. In fact, sexuality, Islam has been considered traditionally a sex positive religion. And by that, it doesn't look that way from the modern stereotype that contemporary Westerners have. But that's also because the contemporary West has gone from one extreme to quite the other extreme, probably in reaction to the first extreme, partially in reaction to it, but also part of other factors that we'll talk about shortly. But, Islam has never, sexuality itself has always been considered something pure, good, holy, if you want to put it that way, but in its proper context. So Islam is very, very strict about, illicit sex. It takes a very strong position against it, but within the proper context, which is basically the context of marriage between a man and a woman, right? That in that context, it's actually considered an act of worship. And the Prophet, as we know, peace be upon him, he said to his companions, you will be rewarded for coming unto your wives. And they said, they were surprised by this. And they said, what? Why would we be rewarded for simply taking care of our desires? And he said, do you not see that if you were to take care of your desires in an illegal way, that you would be punished? And they said, yes. And he said, well, therefore, if you do it in a permissible way, then you will be rewarded, right? So you actually get reward. And so, having relations with one's spouse is considered an act of worship. One is supposed to be in a state of ritual purity, although the act itself vitiates the ritual purity, but you're supposed to get into a state of ritual purity before, because it's as if it's an act of worship.